I'm Harry McCarthy. I'm currently a junior research fellow at Jesus College at the University of Cambridge. And to date, my work has been very performance-based, which is partly why I'm so drawn to this journal and my position within its organisation. And that work on performance really straddles both theatre history as well as present-day performance. And the focus so far has been on boy playing in both of those areas. As well as currently finishing a book on boy actors in early modern England, I'm also starting to pursue the difficult second album, which is hopefully going to be a project on race, but specifically whiteness and constructions of early modern childhood. So my work on boy actors has predominantly been what's drawn me to survey in the past. It's hosted some fantastically transformative theatre historical articles, particularly by David Cathman, which have really sort of shaped how scholars approach quite well-worn questions as regards to boy playing. And my own first contribution to survey was trying to continue that vein. So that was in the most recently published volume on the number of boy actors who trained as boys in one company and then moved to another and forged a career kind of across the early modern theatrical institution. I also have a piece in the forthcoming Shakespeare and Education special issue of Shakespeare Survey, which is much more polyvocal and much more present-day performance oriented. So that's a conversation with Perry Mills, the director of Edward's Boys, who is my co-author of the piece. And it brings in the voices of a huge number of boy performers who've performed with Edward's Boys, reflecting on their educational and formative experiences of performing not only Shakespeare, but his contemporaries. I should also say that I'm very interested in what's known as Shakespeare's contemporaries, even though some of them worked either before he was born or long after he died. And work on those and their shaping influence on the field is something that I would really welcome to this journal as well. I also come to survey from our friends at Shakespeare Bulletin, where I was first editorial assistant and then performance reviews editor. And part of what really excites me about getting to work with another journal is the advanced glimpses that one gets into where the field might be heading and the possibility of having a kind of shaping influence on where the field might be going. And I think that that's, as Vanessa said, one of the greatest privileges and also responsibilities that comes with what we do. And I really welcome Survey's commitment to helping to shape the future of Shakespeare studies. I think it's also important to remember that, as well as being a force for good in the future, Survey also has a responsibility of record in that, as Emma mentioned, it rounds up every year the performances of Shakespeare and also the contributions to criticism, so the year in Shakespeare studies, as it were. And I think that we need to be mindful going forward that those records can also be acts of occlusion and exclusion. And I won't name check anything in particular, but I've been looking back at past issues that were, where the critical roundup was written, and some what I think are quite major works in our field are not present in those roundups. And I'm thinking particularly of work by scholars of colour. And I understand that there are issues of space. There are always issues of space, but I think that we can do better in recording and also celebrating work that really is transformative. I don't personally think that a book needs to have in Shakespeare's time or on the Shakespearean stage, and whatever that might mean in its title, in order to be identified as potentially transformative to the work that we do. And that goes back to something I've written about before in the latest issue of the Shakespeare Journal, co-edited by Owen Price and Farah Karim Cooper. And in that article, I called for a more honest conversation about who historically has been given leave to speak in Shakespeare studies, and argued for a more critical self-reflection of the field, that we, particularly white scholars, that's the we I'm using, have a role in shaping. So I kind of see my role on the board as putting my money, or at least my unpaid time, where my mouth is. I also speak as a contingent scholar who's acutely aware that my non-renewable contract will end just as my time on the board is also coming to an end. So I kind of think that if I'm going to do something, I had better do it now. So just to round up, I'd really echo Vanessa's note there on more interdisciplinary and intersectional approaches. I'd also really like to see surveys role in recording and responding to performance in all forms really maintained, and also perhaps expanding our sense of what performance actually is, as well as what gets documented. So I mentioned Edward's Boys. There's a real gap, I think, in studies on amateur and regional production, either in the UK or more broadly worldwide. And I also probably speak for all of the new members of the board, as well as the current ones, but I'm really also hopeful for future collaborations with initiatives like we saw a couple of months ago with Wendy Lennon's Shakespeare, Race and Pedagogy. So I'd really encourage you, if there's an event or a series of events that you're cooking up that you think could maybe benefit from some kind of exposure, or that there's a way in which survey can work with you on that, then I'd encourage you to get in touch. And just finally, to flag, mentioning the Shakespeare, Race and Pedagogy event, that we're still open for entries for the postgraduate essay prize that Survey is currently sponsoring, and we're open for entries for that until the 1st of May.